हमको बता देना। हम्म, हम्म, हम्म। नमस्कार, आर यू लिसनिंग मी? Here I am supposed to discuss some very fine points regarding history. How to read history, number one. I'll be covering 10 fundamental points which must be covered and which must be considered by a student who is preparing with history optional, even in general studies, but particularly in history optional. After that, I will take the next aspect of the discussion, that is the pattern of questions, what UPSC is following and what UPSC has shown since last few years. So new trends, overall trend as well as new trends. In the third part of the discussion, I'll cover the books, which are the readings you should go through. After that, I'll take your questions. So let me begin with the basic introduction of history, what students should consider while reading history. These are the 10 commandments. These are the 10 commandments, means if you go to Christianity, you will find that they follow 10 commandments. And in Buddhism, this is called Das Seal, 10 code of conducts. But as a student of history, I'll discuss the 10 formulas. Let me introduce the first one. The first formula is this: anybody has to follow the golden triangle while reading history. What is that golden triangle? History begins with fact. Fact is the father of history. And then, as facts are not able to speak on their behalf, so it needs a historian. Historian is the spokesperson of the facts. While writing history, historians uses his imagination, his analytical capacity, his coordination capacity, his applicational virtue, all the things what is considered the wisdom part. Historians use their wisdom while discovering the history hidden into the fact. And on account of this thing, they reach to a conclusion. The conclusion drawn by a historian is the result of two things: fact and the analysis done by a historian. Ideally, it is expected from a historian that he or she should not speak his or her mind while writing history, because history is hidden here in the facts. But this is not possible anyway. History is written by a historian, and historians have their own point of view. Their point of view is framed in a particular context. They have a nation, they have their religion, they have their caste, region, experiences, interest, peer groups, influence of the peer groups as well as teachers. So there are several factors which influence your thinking process, and on account of these things you develop your prejudice. So whenever a historian starts selecting the fact and interpreting the fact, you will always be under the influence of this prejudice. So no historian can speak the last history. A student of history is bound to be subjective. So this is a very fundamental discussion about the history writing. Objective history and subjective history. Ideally, some historians believe that one has to be objective. But the moment you decide to be objective, you will be writing only a chronicle. And the moment you are deciding to derive some conclusion regarding the society, the economy, the culture, the polity, the administration, the governance, the civilization, the direction of the civilization, you are bound to be subjective. At the moment you are becoming subjective, there will be difference of opinions. And on account of these potential differences, you will find that various schools of historiography has evolved. I will discuss about the schools little later. Now, let me go to the second aspect. Use primary and secondary sources to authenticate your facts and ideas. As a student of history, whatever you are writing, you will have to write on account of the facts. But whenever you are writing about the facts, you will have to care for one thing, that sources must be considered while writing. Sources are of two types: literary and archaeological. While you are writing history with the help of a fact, your facts should be supported with a proper source. Like if you are saying that Mauryans adopted the policy of welfare towards their people. Here, if you give the example of the inscription of Rudradaman, Junagadh inscription of Rudradaman, or you are giving the example of the inscription of Sahagora and Mahasthan, where they are helping their people to come out from the famine. If you are giving some examples from Arthashastra, while Chanakya has directed the king to frame the state and to rule the state in a manner where people are kept into the center. When he says that Praja Sukhe Sukhe Raja, the happiness of the king lies in the happiness of the people. If you give the example that Ashoka in his inscription has very vividly described that he is indebted to the people. मैं प्रजा का ऋणी हूं, indebted to the people. They are like our children. प्रजा हमारी संतान है. If you are supporting your facts with the relevant source, your fact becomes authenticated. And commission will always be impressed with this manner, because this is the proper way to write history. Second thing, let me explain little in detail. This thing in little detail. Let me explain this thing in little detail with the trend of the questions UPSC is following. Sources is the soul of first paper. If you want to get good marks in the first paper, first of all, you should understand that map is the master. Map has the master key of the first paper. I'll discuss this aspect of the question little later or some other day. But here, the second point of the first paper about the trend of the question paper is relevant. We can say that sources are the soul, in fact. One question every year you will find based upon the sources. If you try to understand the nature of the question, you will find that direct questions based upon sources are coming in two manners. Direct questions. First is macro and the second is micro. If UPSC is asking you questions from the foreign account, in general, it is the example of macro. And if they are asking you particularly based upon or Huayan or Wenshang or Itzing or Pliny, or for that matter Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, should be considered into the micro case, because these personalities you will come across while you will be reading the pertinent topics. But whenever you open your syllabus, you will find the first topic of ancient Indian history regarding the sources. In that topic, you cover the macro aspect. While covering the macro aspect, you will read numismatics. But when you will go to the pertinent topic, you will come across with the coins of the Kusans and Satavahanas. UPSC has already asked a question. History based upon the coins of Kusanas and Satavahanas. So, two types of questions they are framing based upon the direct sources. Macro type of questions, and that question is generally almost every year. Question number 2A is based upon the direct sources from the macro side. But if you go to the micro side, this is not as frequent as the macro aspect, but we can say that a regular question is coming out of that. The trend is becoming strong and strong and stronger. Now, I will discuss about the indirect question. Indirect questions based upon the sources. Indirect questions. What are those indirect questions? You can take the example of Sangam literature. UPSC has asked you to reconstruct history based upon this Sangam literature. Here we can find two things. You must be knowing the sources hidden in the Sangam literature. This is called Sangam-ias because we know the history on account of the Sangam literature. We know the history of Vedic age based upon the Vedic literature. That's why we are calling them Vedic age. So, you must be knowing the Sangam literature, which is the primary source to speak the history of that age. And the second thing, you have to show the applied wisdom on account of which you construct history. So this is the new trend to examine your wisdom, examine your wisdom which will show the examiner that you have the applicational ability, the cognitive wisdom, your imagination, your analysis, your coordination, your application, and ability to comprehend, and on account of the conflict of the ideas, you can derive a conclusion. If you are showing these virtues, then the commission can be satisfied with your ability to be an administrator. So they can give you good marks. That is why this aspect is particularly becoming very prominent. You can take the another example, Lekha Paddhati from medieval Indian side. Lekha Paddhati is a primary source to write down about the land grant system, particularly used by Professor Ramsan Sharma in his magnum opus book Indian Feudalism. And UPSC has asked a question upon Lekha Paddhati. Take the third example. Bakhar is the primary source on account of which you can write about Shivaji. And they have asked a question on Bakhar this year. So what we are witnessing? We are witnessing that UPSC is moving towards the sources. Why? And what they want to test within you? Only two things. Point number one, must be knowing the basics. Must be knowing the basics regarding that source or the lot of the sources. And the second thing, do you have the applicational wisdom? If you have the applicational wisdom, you deserve to be an IAS officer and you will get good marks. So try to understand the nature of UPSC first and then you read history. Nature of UPSC is not in fact academic. It does not focus extraordinarily on the factual aspect. It focuses on the cognitive aspect. So while writing any answer, you be clear in your head that you will be showing your cognitive aspect primarily and predominantly. You are in fact in a communication with your examiner, and examiner is having a criteria in his or her mind that I will test him or her on this line only, that he or she is deserving for IAS or not deserving for an academician or not. So this is the second aspect. On account of these things, we can say that sources can be considered the soul of first paper. Now let me go to the third point. See geography before you read history. Geography is one of the makers of history. If you read Harappan civilization, it is popularly known as Indus civilization. Some historians are suggesting to call it Saraswati civilization. But archaeology believes that if the name is becoming an issue, then better to name it on account of the site which is discovered the very first. And Harappa is the first site which was discovered. That's why technically Harappan civilization is the right word to pronounce. Now, if you see the role of geography in the making of history, you will find that Himalaya, Vindhya, Krishna, Kaveri, and Indian Ocean, Western Ghat, and Arab Sea, and Bay of Bengal. These are the prominent makers of history of India throughout the ages. If you read history keeping these things in your mind, you will be rational in your application. Any state emerges out of a context. The context is geographical. Geography influences the economy. Geography influences some other aspects as well. So, Harappan civilization is based upon Himalaya. Then you go to the Vedic civilization. It covers the Himalayan region, the same Himalayan region as covered by the Harappans during the Rigvedic age. But if you go to the later Vedic age, you will find that Middle Gangetic Valley is the area. And if you go to the northeastern aspect, you will find that Brahmaputra was behind the cultures and the civilizations evolving in the northeastern region of India. Vindhya was the dividing line. That is why you will find that upper portion of the Vindhya developed the Nagar style of architecture, and the area between Vindhya to Krishna, we witness the baser style of architecture, and from Krishna towards the deep south, we witness Dravidian style of architecture. These are not only the three architectural styles. The primary forms of the architectures are Dravidian and Nagar. Baser is in fact the combination, the mixture of the two, although they were having their own feature as well. But still, we can say that this Deccan between the north and south was the bridge. These are the aspects you have to cover. Number two, while reading political history or economic history or cultural history, if you see the map first, it will not be difficult to remember the facts for a longer period. The third thing is about using the map while writing the answer. If you will use the map while writing the answer, you can improve your marks. Fourth, but the most important thing, that is preparing the map first. That's why I told you that map is the master key of the first paper. Preparing the map first, or at least in the beginning, that will help you enormously. How? If you have prepared the map first, then various topics are in fact factually loaded on account of the basic introduction regarding the sites. If you are reading the prehistory or the proto-history, you will find that almost every age is covering a particular pattern of the facts. What are the artifacts you are discovering in a particular site? And those sites are the questions of the map question. If you remember few things regarding a particular site, then you are in fact knowing the maximum or most of the things regarding that topic. If you know 10 to 15 sites regarding the Mesolithic age in India, or 7-8 sites regarding the earlier age, that is the earlier Stone Age, the 15 to 20 sites regarding the Neolithic age, only 8 to 10 regarding the Paleolithic, 12 to 15 regarding the Mesolithic, 15 to 20 regarding the Neolithic, you are knowing most of the facts. So, if you have prepared the map, you have almost prepared the topic. So, it is a two-in-one formula. If you are supposed to write about the Mauryan imperial expansion, you will have to write based upon the Ashokan inscription. And if you look at the question of the map, you will find that Ashokan inscriptional sites are the popular sites from where the questions are framed. So, if you are preparing the map question, in fact, you are preparing the topics as well. If you are preparing about the educational institutions in ancient India, you will find that those educational institutions are the popular sites from where the questions regarding the map is asked. And if you have remembered few things about the various educational institutions like Kanchi, the Bengi, the Vallabhi, the Takshashila, including Nalanda, Vikramshila, Udantapuri, Sompuri, can you imagine? No difficulty at all while you are writing the answer. If they will be asking an independent question of any independent institution, this is possible only in the case of Nalanda. So, you prepare it in little detail. Otherwise, if you are knowing only the introductory information regarding those institutional initiatives, you can frame the answer. And those basic informations are already supplied while you are preparing the map aspect. If you are asked a question to deal with the topic regarding the architecture evolved during the post-Mauryan period, you can be very, very comfortable if you have prepared the map aspect, because all the sites like Khajuraho, like Sanchi, Bharhut, Nagazunikonda, Amravati, Karle, Bhaj, Bedsa, Junnar, these are the sites evolved during this period. And if you are remembering 3 to 4 lines regarding the each, you will have to decide that which information is to be used and which is to be left. You will have no burden regarding the facts. Your answer will always be factually rich, supremely rich. So, map does not give you good marks only in the question number 1 out of 50 you can get more than 40, rather it helps you in various other questions as well. That's why I'm telling time and again that map is the master key of the paper 1. Now let me go to the another aspect. Develop understanding of society, culture, economy and polity before reading the facts. What is this? If you read history, you have to be clear in your head that history is a discipline of studies. History is a discipline of studies. History is a discipline of studies means what? You read history in this fashion: fact, logic and conclusion. Fact, logic and conclusion. You read history in this fashion. You read history of an age. You read history of an age, of a place, and then you read history with the understanding that historians have their prejudice. Historians have their prejudice. You read history in this manner, but $1 billion question is still left. And rather, you can say that the most important thing is still missing. What do we read in history? These are the patterns how we read history. This is not the content of history. That is why I have used this line. History is a discipline of studies. So these are the methods to read history. But the question still remains the same. While reading history, what we read? We read economy. We read polity. We read culture and society. So these are the contents of history. So before going into the detail of the facts or the ideology which determines the prejudice of a historian or the sources on account of which you find the facts, you must be knowing the basic regarding the subject. Basic regarding the subject. If you read, for that matter, society, take the example of society. If you read society, you should understand that what are the points you should cover while reading society. Supposingly, I'm not going into any extension, but the basics will be covered. You take the points. While reading society, you will have to cover the Varna system, caste system as well. Both are not the same or in all the cases. Varna system, caste system. Second thing is about the condition of women. The third thing about the slavery. The fourth thing about the urbanization. Fifth one is about guild system. Some other aspects can be asked, like the condition of common man. Common man. So, while reading society, you must be clear in your head that what are the subtopics you will have to cover. Number one. Number two, these are the macro points. But you have to go to the micro as well. Supposingly, take the example of condition of women. If you are reading regarding the condition of women, you should be clear in your mind that what are the points you should cover while describing the condition of the woman. 7 or 8 basic points are essential on account of which you can show the status of the woman. I'm not going into the coverage of those 7 or 8 points. Here I am interested only in making you understand that if you will not be knowing those 7 or 8 basic criteria on account of what the condition of woman can be shown, you cannot write history even if you are knowing extraordinary detail of the facts. Because you need a container in which the content will be contained. So these are the basic things you have to cover first, then you go to the factual detail of any topic. If you can cover these things, you will find that you will always be in search of the facts to prove your points. In that case, facts will be your discoveries. And the discovered facts are never irritating, never boring, never burdensome. While facts coming without of search, without any discovery, without of any want, they can trouble you. It means if a student of history is reading a topic in a history book without knowing the subject matter of that particular aspect like society or the condition of woman, it means he or she is inviting the trouble for himself or herself. If you are reading about the literature, you must be knowing that what are the basic points you should cover while reading or writing about the literature. The language, the grammar, the word stocks, the metaphors, the inferences, the semblances, the translation, the original literature, the poetry, the prose, the dramas, the epics, the different styles of writing, the analogy, different subjects the literary figures have covered, different styles like slays or the champu or the dostakhune as used by Amir Khusro, champu used by Harishen, slays used by Sandhyakar Nandi. The impact of some other culture on the literature of that particular age, like the Sanskrit literature has influenced the literature of the early medieval era. You go to the literature of Bangla or the Oriya or the Tamil or the Telugu or Kannada, you will find that the Aryan influence was enormous. The impact of the previous culture, like 6th century BC, has witnessed a cultural revolution in India. That revolution has influenced the literature of Mauryan. This post-Mauryan period has witnessed the revival of or the renaissance of Hindu culture, or you can say the Sanatan culture. That renaissance or the revival of that Aryan or the Sanatan culture has influenced the literature of the post-Mauryan period or the literature of the Gupta period. The patronage provided by the state or the patronage provided by the group of the people, like the guilds have patronized the Buddhist literature enormously. If you can cover these points, your answer is going to be extraordinarily comprehensive and multidimensionally covered. And you have to keep these things while writing the literature about the Mughal period as well, or the literature writing regarding the modern period as well. Whenever you are reading literature, you should consider these things. So first you understand that these are the basic points one has to keep in his or her mind while covering the topic regarding literature. If you are covering a topic regarding painting, you must be knowing 7 or 8 points on account of which painting can be presented. The design of the brush, the color, the canvas, the subject, the school of thought or the style, the patronage, the age of the influence of the age, the continuity and the contribution to the ages coming after that. If you understand that these are the basic points on account of which you can understand painting well or you can express painting well, then you start reading about the Ajanta painting. If you know that on account of these points you can express the painting well, then you can express the question regarding the Mughal painting as well, or you can express the modern painting as well. So first of all, you should be knowing that what are the basic 7-8 points you have to keep in your mind while reading painting. The same thing applies with the sculpture as well. If you read architecture, once again you have to consider basic points. If you are reading administration, you have to keep the basic things in your mind. If you read about the nature of the state, you have to consider the basic points. If you are reading about the agriculture or the trade, the international trade, the industry, the guild system, the banking system, the credit system, you will have to keep basic things in your mind first. Then you read a history book or a particular topic for that matter. If you are not keeping your mind clear and informed about the subject matter of the topic, and you have started reading the history book, it means you have invited the trouble to you, and you are the culprit. The culprit is not history. Generally, people keep charging upon history that history is a boring subject. History is not a boring subject. History is a very interesting subject. Rather, history is one of the most useful subjects for the civilizational aspect. If you do not understand your past, you cannot understand your present, and you cannot move into a better direction for a bright future. But if you keep reading history in a misdirected manner, you will keep charging history. While you will be the guilty, you will keep throwing guilt upon history. But if you have read history in this manner, history will become marks fetching, history will become interesting, history will become useful, and then facts will become interesting. Facts will become useful. So, now let me move to the another aspect. Interdisciplinary approach gives comprehensive understanding. What is this interdisciplinary approach? Interdisciplinary approach means interdiscipline. Interdiscipline means various disciplines are there, and those disciplines are inherently coherent to each other. Means, if you read economy, you link it with society. If you read society, you link it with economy as well. Polity, culture, all are inherently integrated. In fact, if you read economy of the Delhi Sultanate, you can understand the reason why Delhi Sultanate moved towards urbanization. And this is the point from where UPSC has asked question this year. How the foreign trade during the 13th, 14th century contributed in urbanization. So, if you read these two words, foreign trade and urbanization, foreign trade is the part of economy and urbanization is the part of society. The question is constructed in an interdisciplinary manner. Even if the question is not directly constructed in this manner, you have to understand that history can be understood only in this manner. Rigvedic economy was pastoral. Now you can explain the Rigvedic society even if you have not read something about the Rigvedic society. Because a pastoral economy will have a rural society. Even in the rural society, there will not be the stable rural society, but they will have the nomadic rural society. A nomadic rural society is always an insecure society. They suffer on the front of security. They face challenges regarding the security. So, they will have to deal with it. There is no state to provide them the security. Then how they can deal with this? Individually they cannot. So, they will have to deal with collectivity. Collectively they can deal with it. So, they decided to remain collectively, means community living. And if you want to live in a community, you will have to understand that community demands equality. Otherwise, your crisis can be my opportunity, or my crisis can be your opportunity. Community needs equality. And that is why, if you read the Rigvedic society, you will find that these are the basic features of Rigvedic society. They were rural, they were nomadic, they were communitarian, they were egalitarian. All these points we have understood without reading the social reality of the Rigvedic people. We have only one information with us, that Rigvedic economy was pastoral. And if you are knowing that Rigvedic economy is pastoral, you can understand that what kind of state they will have. What kind of state they will have? They will not have a regular state, because regular state is there with a professional military, a regular bureaucracy, big political structure, the palace, the secretariat, the judicial system. And all these things need good amount of money. That is possible only on account of the regular source of revenue. And the regular source of revenue is possible only when your economy can afford it. But if your economy is pastoral, it is impossible. What will be the alternative in that case? The alternative in that case is the collective political structure, headed by a head. You can consider him as your Sardar. The tribal polity. What is the feature of the tribal polity? Tribal polity is headed by a Sardar, but Sardar is not arbitrary in his decision making. Sardar takes the decision with the consent of the people's representative bodies like Sabha, Samiti, Vidat, Gan, as we have witnessed during the early Vedic age. So, you can understand the Vedic polity even without going into the depth of the Vedic polity, if you know that the Vedic economy is pastoral. This is what we have to understand. One question is asked about, in 2006, UPSC asked about changing approaches of study ancient history. What are these approaches? I'll cover it little later. Please wait. So, if you want to understand history properly, you should read history with this interdisciplinary approach. I have given only few examples because I have the limitation of the time also. But you can understand one thing, that in every topic this formula applies. Now let me go to the next point. Comparative study will give you clarity and comprehensive understanding. Comparison brings clarity. In humanity particular, you don't have the objective understanding of any subject. So while you compare it with another or someone with some other, something with some other thing, your mind gets clarity. So for a student who is studying humanity, one has to consider the role of comparison. You take the example, nature of the Indian National Congress during 1885 to 1905. Nature of the Indian National Congress during 1905 to 1920 and nature of the Indian National Congress during 1920 to 1947. If you want to understand the difference between the two stages, you have to compare it. History evolves with continuity. History evolves with continuity. And what you will find? Number one, continuity, and number two, new things coming. History evolves and evolves with continuity. That is why we find two things in every age: continuation of the last phase and new things coming in that new age. So here you find that from 1885 to 1905, Congress was having a particular nature. But if you go to the second phase, you will find that something of the last phase was continuing, but something new has also emerged. So comparison brings clarity between the two ages, and the understanding of changes with continuity gives you very comprehensive understanding. So these are the two very, very significant aspects if you have to clear your head in your subject or regarding a particular topic. Always focus to these two special tricks: comparative study and study having the idea of changes with continuity. Congress during the first phase before 1905 was asking for certain reforms, the political, administrative, economic reforms. In 1905, they moved towards the demand of Swaraj. And even after coming of Mahatma, they kept demanding Swaraj, which moved towards Purna Swaraj later on. What are the continuities and what are the changes? You should understand. And if you understand this thing, you will understand modern India and Indian national movement very properly. If you understand the administration, what are the basic points you have to cover while reading administration? After that, you read the administration of Maurya and you read the administration of Gupta. And then you will find that during the Gupta administration, so many aspects of the Mauryan administration was continuing, but so many aspects were left and so many new aspects emerged. If you understood this style, then you can compare it very clearly. Mauryan administration or Gupta administration comes later on. First, you understand the basic points regarding administration. Then you read Mauryan administration. After that, if you read Gupta administration, what you find? So many things were continuing, so many things were left, and so many new things emerged. So history evolved in this manner. History evolved in this manner. This is Mauryan administration. And if you go to the Gupta administration, what you find? This aspect was continuing and this aspect was left. And what happened during the Gupta period? Some new things emerged. This is how history evolves. If you want to understand this thing very properly, you have to keep two things in your mind: comparative studies and change it with continuity. This point is also covered in the last discussion. Catch the change and connect it with continuity. So I don't think that any requirement is there to go in further detail regarding this point. Now, read different schools of history while you write history. Some questions are asked, so let me cover the question because now I am moving toward the 9th point, which is almost the last point. So first of all, so many wishes are there. So good afternoon to you all. And one question is asked from approaches, and then wishes are there only. So let me go to the School of Historiography. Yogesh, your question will be dealt here. In 2006, UPSC has asked about the various approaches to study ancient history. Approaches means what? The ideas on account of which you understand the evolution of society, the economy, the polity, the culture. And those approaches are imperialist, nationalist, Marxist, structuralist, and some new methods have been applied, like focus on literary sources or archaeological sources. Use of myths as the sources, use of myth as the sources, understanding the human psychology, to understand, then regional history. These are the different schools or different approaches evolved over the time to study ancient India. I'm not in this condition to discuss all the things, but while covering the course, you can cover all the things. And you must consider all the things. Supposingly, you take the example. So many historians initially wrote that post-Mauryan period belongs to the Dark Age. Why? Because they were writing history with two particular approach. Approach number one, they were nationalist. If they will write history with this nationalistic sentiment, they say that Mauryan was the period of integration and the Gupta is the period of integration once again, while the post-Mauryan period is the period of disintegration caused by the foreign invasion. Number two, their history writing was particularly based upon the politico-centric state of mind. And they did not discover the detailed fact of that age. They wrote their history based upon a common sense with lots of presumptions. Like this interpreted history in this manner that if politics was disintegrating, so many regional states were emerging, external invasion was happening, regular warheads was the reality. So we can understand that on account of these things, infrastructure would have been neglected. Monetary system would have been neglected. Uniform weights and measures would not have been possible. Security crisis would have hampered the prospect of trade, industry and other things. So prosperity would have been hampered. So on account of these things, urbanization would have been hampered. Guilds would have been weakened. So on account of these things, culture would have been neglected. So overall, what we can say that the post-Mauryan period was the period of the fall, of the downfall, the downturn. The period can be considered as the dark age of Indian history. All these things of darkness were in fact based upon assumption, not based upon the facts. Later on, historians started researching and they found the detailed fact, and now we consider that period as the period of prosperity in many terms. And as far as the emergence of the regional states are concerned, we consider them positively, not negatively, because Mauryans' disintegration cannot be repented upon, because Mauryans were not the representative of the nation state. They were the imperialistic bodies. If there is an imperialistic body and that body is broken, and due to that some regional states are emerging and those regional states are promoting their regional culture, they are causing the prosperity in their regional areas and in the life of their people, then what is wrong in that? If you compare the living of Bengali people in the early medieval age with the earlier period of the Guptas or the period of Mauryas, you will find that the Bengalis were in comparatively very, very good condition during the Palas period. But how can you consider the Palas as the period of the fall? If you consider the period of Vakatakarj in Maharashtra, you will find that the life of the Maharashtra people during the Vakatakarj was considerably well in comparison to the period of the Mauryans. How can you consider that Mauryan period was good for the people of Maharashtra? Imperial state always takes resources from the regional areas and prosperity comes to the metropolis. Is our approach remain same while studying world history, sir? I am struggling to understand history of ideas for enlightenment, its various thinkers to liberalism and constitutionalism. In fact, if you read the world history, you will find that so many aspects of the ancient history is not applied in that case, but historiography remains the same. So I will discuss this historiography just after a few seconds. So please wait. Let me cover my point first. If you read history with this politico-centric state of mind, you cannot understand the positive aspects of either the period of post-Maurya or the period of post-Gupta or the period of 18th century. All these three periods are generally initially stated by the historians as the period of dark age. Later on, what we have witnessed that they were having so many golden things also in their period. Now, let me move to the other aspects of the same topic. Read different schools. Why we should read different schools? Let me remind you the first point. History is hidden into the facts. You use your logic, your imagination, your analysis, your applicational aspect, your coordinational aspect, your ability to comprehend, your ability to decide against the dilemmas and the dichotomies. And then you go to the conclusion. But as a historian, if you are following the ideal path of history writing, you will always consider the fact as the father of history, but no one can be absolutely free from the prejudice. No one can be. The prejudice can be differentiated, can be classified. Two types of prejudice we have witnessed. One is institutionalized prejudice and another is a normal kind of prejudice any individual has in his or her mind. Supposingly, if I am not belonging to any school, then too I will have my own prejudice. But that prejudice will not stop me thinking in a particular manner or against a particular idea. I will not bother that my conclusion will help somebody or can harm somebody. If a Marxist historian is writing, he will always or she will always consider something. If a Marxist historian is writing about the early medieval age of Indian history, they will always consider that age as the age of feudalism. Because if they do not consider that period as the age of feudalism, it means they are denying the existence of feudalism in the history of India. And if they are denying the existence of feudalism in India, it means they are denying the prospect of coming communism in India. Because Marx has predicted that world is moving towards communism. And that world is moving towards communism is a prediction of Marx. But Marx said that my prediction is based upon historical understanding, because human civilization is moving in a particular direction. They started their journey from the primitive age, moved towards the slavery, then moved towards feudalism. After that, capitalism came, and after that, socialism is coming. And from socialism, the humanity will move towards communism. Some countries will witness it earlier, and some country will witness it later. World is not in the uniform condition. Different parts of the world is in fact on different stations. But all the part of the world has the same destiny, because all the part of the world has begun from the same position or same point. Every part of the world has begun from the primitive communism, and every part of the world has to move towards communism. They will have to go through the phases of slavery, the feudalism and capitalism. So if they will write about the early medieval age, they will have to show that Indian history of that age is the history of feudalism. If I am not a Marxist, I am free to accept feudalism or to deny feudalism. If somebody is a liberalist, he will deny that idea of feudalism. If somebody is a nationalist, he will deny the idea of feudalism. They will deny the idea of feudalism essentially. But I will not be denying essentially, or neither I will be accepting essentially, if I am not institutionalized in my prejudice. But even if I am not institutionalized in my prejudice, I cannot claim that I have no prejudice. So prejudice can be classified into two categories. Category number 1, institutionalized, and category number 2, not institutionalized. Marxist school, the nationalist school, the imperialist school, the subaltern school, these are the schools which can be considered as the institutionalized schools of historiography. And one has to understand these ideologies. If you do not understand the ideology, you cannot understand history, because whatever you read in a book, you read written by a historian, and that historian has a prejudice. And UPSC is giving you the questions based upon the sentences of these books. David Thompson has written a book named Europe Since Napoleon. I have gone through at least 20 questions from that book, at least 20 questions. Percival Spear has written a book on modern India. More than 20 questions I have witnessed from that book, UPSC has asked. So many questions have been asked from modern India, freedom struggle written by Somi Sarkar. So many questions are asked even based upon the ancient and early medieval age written by Upinder Singh. So many questions are asked from the wonder that was India written by A.L. Bassam and Rijvi, respectively in ancient India and medieval India. Many questions are asked from the book written by Rolf Fish and Burns, Modern Civilization. These historians have their own point of view, and they have written history in detail, but they have written with their prejudice. And one sentence from their book is converted into your question, and they have asked you to comment upon, or to discuss upon, or to examine it. So many other directive words are also used. I will not be discussing the detail regarding the directive words, at least in this discussion. We'll discuss little later, some other day. But what I want to discuss, that if you do not understand the ideology behind their decision making, behind their prejudice, how can you understand what they have concluded and what is the prejudice this historian is having, and how you can be able to comment against that? If Percival Spear has written that heyday of the British rule in India was also the high noon of the economic doctrine of laissez-faire, if you do not understand that this statement is given by an imperialist historian, how can you comment? If Ansal is saying that we won India in the state of absent-mindedness, how can you comment against this statement if you do not understand that the historian is imperialist? If you do not understand that a Marxist historian has said that both freedom and partition is the contribution of the middle class in India, how can you write an answer, a good answer, if you do not understand that this sentence belongs to a Marxist school? Marxist school has a particular notion regarding the Indian national movement. They do not consider this as the national movement, because they consider that, in fact, India was moving towards a class movement. There was a tussle between the Indian bourgeoisie and the British bourgeoisie. The government in India during that period was in favor of the British bourgeoisie, and the Indian bourgeoisie wanted the government in their side. So they fought against the British government to bring the Indian government which can serve the interest of Indian bourgeoisie. And that is why after independence, communists kept repeating that ये आजादी झूठी है, भारत के वीर जवानों, मजदूरों और किसानों हम बर्बाद हो गए, झूठी अफवाह मचा दी कि हम आजाद हो गए. So what does it mean? It means that if you want to write a good answer, you have to understand the prejudice of the historian. And before knowing the prejudice, you have to understand the ideology. The ideologies can be dealt in detail while discussing in the classroom only. But here I just wanted to suggest that if you do not understand the ideology, you cannot write an answer. So prejudice is universal. Gospel truth is impossible. One another question is asked. Again, what will be source of question? The like this here. Not getting your question, not becoming able to read it. How to read Maratha history deeply such. I have discussed about the Marathas earlier in the first topic only. Now, let me discuss this thing. Decide rationally, but don't be affirmative. Decide rationally means what? First triangle is this: fact, logic, and conclusion. This is the first triangle. This is the ideal triangle. Number 2, fact is chosen by a historian, and fact is analyzed by a historian. So prejudice is bound to come. Number 3, humanity is bound to be subjective. Nobody enjoys the luxury to speak the gospel truth, the last word in humanity. So, don't be so affirmative about your decision. If the subject is bound to be subjective, because you have a point of view, but the question arises why you have a point of view which is different from the other's point of view. Because you have a particular context, you have a particular experience, you have a particular peer group, you have a particular country, you have a particular religion, you have a particular caste, you have a particular region, you have a particular class. So you have a particular context. That is why you have a particular point of view which is different from the other's point of view. So don't be affirmative about your conclusion. Initially, during the early phase of modernization, the Enlightenment thinkers kept claiming that they have discovered the last truth. On account of the rationalist school of thought, Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz claimed to derive the last truth. They started stating that as Newton has derived the conclusion in science, we can derive conclusion in humanity also. But their uniformity of decision making, focus on uniformity of decision making became detrimental. Capitalism, socialism, and nationalism, all the isms came with their own detrimental resultants. When world moved towards two disasters of 20th century in form of two world wars, then intellectual people started thinking differently. Out of this post reconsideration of their extraordinary focus on uniformity of the truth, they moved towards postmodernism. Diderot is the founder of this idea. So many other thinkers contributed later on. Now, I can say that what is the basic presumption of postmodernism? The basic presumption of postmodernism is almost similar, almost, not absolutely, almost similar to the idea propounded by Mahavir Jain in his Anekantavad, manyness of the truth. Both say the same thing. What is the same thing? The truth is complex. And if truth is complex, you cannot claim about a particular truth. Mahavir says that a man sees only one aspect of the truth. So many other aspects are not seen by him or her. So, how can you claim that you have seen the truth in absolute manner? And if you have not seen the truth absolutely, then better you use the word shayad, perhaps. That is why he propounded the idea of syadvad, the idea of using perhaps. These are the new things. If you are still claiming so affirmatively in the age of postmodernism, it means you are showing that you are not in tune with the modern age, or the postmodern age rather, you can say. You are not in tune with your own age. This age is not the age of the idea of uniformity of the truth. If one truth is derived by a thinker and he is saying that, he is claiming that throughout the world this truth can be applied. Today we are living in the age where we are open enough to accept that time and space matters. And the individual experiences also matter. So after these points, we can consider our 10 points covered. After covering these basic points, now I am going to cover little additional points. What are those additional points? In history, question makers are moving gradually to the micro side from the macro side. Number two, they are moving towards socio, cultural, and economic aspect. Number three, relevance based questions are asked freely and repeatedly, like the relevance of Upanishad, the relevance of Jainism, the relevance of Buddhism. If one relevance is asked, you have to understand that now from the another or the another or the another can be asked. If they have asked about the use of Sangam literature in reconstructive Sangam history, then you should understand that they can ask about the use of Vedic literature in reconstructing the Vedic history. And as they are moving towards the micro side, if they have asked about the Bakhar or the Lekha Paddhati, or already they have asked about the sources when they asked the question regarding Jainul Abidin. So now they can ask a question based upon Nusipihar, or they can ask a question based upon Kalidas, or a question can be asked based upon some other text of any particular age. Any text of a particular age can be based to frame a question. So you should keep thinking in this manner. One another trend what we can witness UPSC is following these days, that is asking a generic question. Generic question means what? One generic statement is given, and out of that statement you have to discuss whole history. Like every march begins with a single step. Long march begins with a single step. Every long march begins with a single step. UPSC has already asked. This is a generic statement. This statement does not belong to any topic. This statement is given to test your understanding of the whole syllabus. As this question was asked from the world history side, you can use maximum examples from the world history. Some people have linked it with the long march of China. But this is absolutely wrong. Every long march begins with a single step. Means even if you have begun very singularly at a very tiny level, you can turn it into a long march. This is the first meaning of the statement. You can give few examples, like the case of Renaissance, or the case of Industrial Revolution, or the case of making of nation state, or the case of the making of world global, or the case of making Europe European Union. This European Union has begun with ECSC. You can give so many examples. After that, the second aspect begins. Every single step will not be turned into a long march. Forget about the small steps. Even the bigger steps fail to continue or to become bigger. You can take the example of Vienna Congress. Vienna Congress was the greatest assemblage of European powers in 1815, but they failed by the coming of 1860. Why they failed? They failed because they were trying to curb the path of the evolution of the civilization. The evolution of civilization was moving into a particular direction. The direction of the civilization was democratic, libertarian, equalitarian, towards capitalism, towards growth of new economic model. If the direction of the civilization is in this particular way, how the assemblage of the princes can stop it, can hinder it for a longer period. They were bound to fail, and they failed. What is the lesson hidden into this description? Every single step does not turn into a long march. Only those single steps turn into the long marches which have the direction of evolution in its side. If you are in the right side of the evolution of the civilization, you will survive, you will revive, and you will turn into a long march later on, one day. And if you are against the tide of the evolution, you will be demolished, destroyed, devolved one day. Even if you are organized, even if you are supported and patronized by the state, the military, the bureaucracy, the money, so many things you are having in your favor, the paper, the magazine, the television for present day. If you have so many things in your favor, then too you cannot survive. And if your opposition is having nothing in fact in your comparison, then too they will survive and later on revive and finally turn into a long march, if they are in the side of the evolution of the civilization. The potent and the competent changes cannot be restricted to happen. So this is the point what you have to describe. Later on, if you go to the another aspect of the trend of the question making, one last trend I want to share with you. So many questions UPSC is asking, which can be called the questions based upon a theme. The thematic questions are asked. You don't need to go into the detail to study the topic. Like the idea regarding the woman is almost the same in Dharmasastras and Arthasastra. So many Dharmasastras are written, and the Shastra has a full description regarding the woman as well. So idea regarding the woman. Already I have discussed that if you want to write about the woman, you have to consider 7, 8, 9 points which can be called the criteria to understand the condition of the woman. Along with that, you have to give the examples from various Dharmasastras, the Apastamba Sutra, the Bodhayana Sutra, the Vasishta Sutra, the Gautam Sutra, the Manu Smriti, the Vishnu Smriti, the Yagbalka Smriti, the Narada Smriti, the Katyayana Smriti, the Brihaspati Smriti, the Deval Smriti. So many Smritis, so many commentaries. All these are the examples of Dharmasastras. And you have to write only one question of 225 words. So you can understand that the knowledge of the topic is not the basic thing. Understanding of the theme is important if you want to deal with these questions. You take another example. Varna system during whole ancient Indian period was an hypothesis only, was a recommendation only. So what is the period of the coverage from Rigved to later Vedic age to 6th century BC to Mauryan period to post-Mauryan period to Gupta period, the later Gupta period? What a bigger canvas you are having. If you are not knowing the factual detail, you don't have to worry. But you have to understand that Varna system, what you have read in your books, they were not the rule of the kings. They were not the books of history. They were the books of their own category, the religious books, the recommendation kind of books. And those who were recommending, they were having their prejudice. And whatever the prejudice they are having, they have written their book with their prejudice. So their recommendation cannot be called the history of that age. Number two, we will have to show the other aspect of the coin as well. Flip side of the coin can be witnessed when you will read that Buddhism was flourishing, which does not believe in Varna system. Jainism was also flourishing. Tantricism has flourished in so many regions. You find that Nandas were the Sudras and they became the powerful king. Who were the Mauryans? Is it not still clear? Who were the Guptas? So many people believe that Guptas were the Vaisyas. Who were Harsa, Vardhans? Who were the Vardhans, including Harshavardhan? So many people still believe that they were the Vaisyas. So no clarity is there in the mind of historians about the biggest representatives, the political representatives of ancient India, that they were the Kshatriyas or not Kshatriyas. So what we have in our belly, we can understand that the condition of the Varna system was not so placid, not so smooth, not so very strong all the time, as we have read in the books written by the imperialist historians, or even in some cases the historians who belong to the Dalit school or the Marxist school. And these are the new trends the UPSC is following. You can take the case of Dark Age. This is the thematic question. If you understand the theme, you can write the answer even if you have not read very properly. Or the question based upon the feudalism. UPSC has asked 3 times the questions in different languages. The basic theme of the question is that, can we consider the age of early medieval era as the age of feudalism? This is a question based upon a theme. If you understand the theme, you can write the answer very, very properly, even if you do not know the detailed facts. So these are the basic things I wanted to discuss with you. And the program will be discussed and will be supplied to you by the officials. What are the features of the program we are offering to you, and what will be the schedule will be dealt in detail by the officials. I wanted to discuss history and historiography only. Please discuss books to refer after NCRT. After NCRT, you will have to cover only one book, I think, for ancient, medieval, modern, if you have so many options and you are suffering from the crisis of the option, then better you read IGNO. Along with that, if you can, then I will suggest Upinder Singh for ancient and early medieval age. For modern, I will suggest, if you can, then Shekhar Bandyopadhyay from Policy to Partition. Along with that, a new book is becoming popular. That is Ishita Banerjee Dubey from Cambridge for modern India. But even if you don't read, you don't worry. I'll be covering those additional things in the questions. You just don't worry. And for the world history, if you can read, then better you read Burns, The History of Civilization, along with one very, very good book written by David Thompson. The name of the book is Europe Since Napoleon. After that, from First World War to onward, you can read Mastering the Modern World, written by Norman Lowe. These are the books you have to cover. And this is all about our discussion today. Now I will take your leave. Bye bye. Take care. Thank you.